2000 years ago, cannabis was one of the most important medicines on earth. Doctors across China, India, the Middle East, and eventually Europe reached for it constantly. Then, in the span of a single generation, the world did a complete about face, declared it had no accepted medical value at all, and made it genuinely difficult to even study. So, what was it? Asian miracle cure or worthless weed? Here's the uncomfortable answer: both of those stories are wrong, and the real one, which the evidence actually says, is more surprising and a lot more honest than anything either side wants to sell you. Let's separate the medicine from the myth. One thing up front, I'm going to tell you what independent scientific reviews have concluded. I'm not giving medical advice, I'm not recommending anyone use anything, and where the evidence is thin, I'm going to say so plainly. Start at the beginning. Cannabis as medicine is genuinely Asian, and it's not one culture, it's almost all of them. Chinese medical tradition recorded it thousands of years ago. In India, it was woven into Ayurvedic medicine. It shows up in the ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Middle Eastern texts. For most of recorded history, across most of the civilized world, this plant sat in the doctor's bag. And it had a real Western medical movement too. In the 1800s, an Irish physician named William O'Shaughnessy, working in India, studied local medical use and brought cannabis into Western medicine. By the late 19th century, cannabis extracts were a normal part of the Western pharmacy tincture on the shelf, listed in the official medical references of the day. This was not fringe, it was mainstream medicine. And then in the early 20th century, it all collapsed and fast. Through the 1930s and 40s, a wave of prohibition swept the world. Cannabis was pulled from official pharmacopoeias, and in the 1961, an international treaty placed it in the most restrictive category of controlled substances, the tier reserved for drugs considered to have little or no medical use. Remember, we touched on this treaty back in the regulation episode. Here's the part that matters most and is subtle. That prohibition did not just stop people using cannabis, it nearly froze the science. If a substance is locked in the most restricted legal category, actually running proper clinical trials on it becomes slow, expensive, and bureaucratically brutal. So, for decades, the research just did not happen, and you need to hold that thought because it's the key to the whole evidence puzzle. Then slowly the door reopened. In the 1916s, the chemist Raphael McCallum finally isolated THC. In the 1990s came the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, our episode 4 story, which for the first time explained how these compounds actually work in the body. Medical programs began appearing from the late 1990s onward, and in recent years, regulators have approved a small number of specific cannabis derived medicines, properly tested, standardized product for specific defined conditions. For example, a purified CBD medicine for certain rare childhood epilepsies and THC and CBD mouth spray for multiple sclerosis. Note what those approvals are: narrow, specific, and evidence based, not cannabis cures things, particularly products for particular conditions backed by trials. Which brings us to big question everyone actually wants answered. Strip away the Asian reputation and the modern hype. What does the hard evidence show today? The most rigorous answer we have came from an independent expert review by the US National Academies, which sifted through thousands of studies and sorted the conclusions by how strong the evidence really was. And here's what they found. At the top, The conclusive or substantial evidence tier. The list is short, just three areas: chronic pain in adults, nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy, and spasticity in the multiple sclerosis, that where the evidence was strongest. One step down, moderate evidence for a few things like certain short term sleep problems, and then this is the crucial part for the huge long list of other conditions that people routinely claim cannabis treats. The review rated the evidence is limited, insufficient, or in some cases absent, not disproven, necessarily just not established. Sit with that constraint. On one side, a plant with a 5,000-year reputation and an internet full of miracle stories. On the other, a rigorous audit that says the strong evidence really only support a short, specific list and everything else needs a lot more research. Now, why is that list so short? And here's where I have to genuinely even handed, because this cuts against both camps. To the hype crowd, a 5,000-year history and a pile of personal stories is not the same thing as proof. The ruler of anecdote is not data. Lots of things people were certain worked for centuries turn out not to. That's exactly why we invented clinical trials. But to the dismissive crowd, there's an equally important point. Remember that the research was frozen for decades by prohibition. So, a lot of that insufficient evidence does not mean we tested it and it failed. It often means we were never allowed to properly test it in the first place. And the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So, the honest position, the grown up position, sits in the uncomfortable middle. For a few conditions, the evidence is genuinely solid. For many others, it's an open question that deserves real, rigorous research rather than either blind faith or blanket dismissal. And critically, the studies that do exist keep bumping into a problem we have hit all series long. Without a standardized, consistent product, you cannot run a clean trial, which loops us right back to why the quality and standardization we covered in the last two episodes matters so much. You can't build good evidence on an inconsistent plant. So, the real story: cannabis was a genuine mainstream medicine for thousands of years. Then, prohibition did not just ban it, it silenced the science for decades. Today, as the research slowly catches up, the honest picture is neither miracle nor myth. Strong evidence for a short, specific list of uses, real uncertainty, and open questions for a long list of others, and a small number of properly approved medicines that show what the rigorous part actually looks like. And maybe that's the most important lesson in this whole series. The interesting truth about cannabis was never it cures everything or it does nothing. Is that a plant this old and this complex deserves better than hype from one side and dismissal from the other. It deserves evidence, and that work is still being done. That's